Soon I was standing face to face with Colonel Scott. His scarred, weathered face was familiar and his presence was intimidating. I stood at attention, giving him a formal salute. He stared at me for a long time, trying to break my spirit with his gaze, but I didn't flinch. Without any preamble, he asked me if I knew the penalty for murder. He told me an Indian soldier was dying, and it wasn't an accident. The pressure was mounting. I told the colonel that we were being framed, but he just shook his head. He claimed that only he and I knew the real truth, but to the world, this looked like a cold-blooded assassination. He then mentioned Captain Jennifer. Scott explained that Jennifer didn't know the full scope. She was just told how to help us get a good position in the course. Scott pointed out that my friend used a sniper rifle this time, whereas before, I had taken out targets without using such lethal force. I tried to defend our actions, but he cut me off. He said he had video footage that we returned to the exact point where this lethal game began. The snipers who had been eliminated from the competition were already back at the camp. I sat in the film hall, waiting for the rest to arrive. A few elite shooters were already there, whispering in shock about how quickly the rumors of the injury had spread. Everyone was speculating about the wounded soldier. I saw Liza Luna approaching us, her face filled with worry and tension. Before she reached us, I whispered to Sardar, warning him not to reveal the truth to anyone yet. Luna looked at us with deep concern, asking if we were all right. She was desperate to know who had been hit during the operation. I didn't want to lie to her, but the truth was too dangerous to speak aloud in this room. I played it cool, telling her that we would find out soon enough. Within 15 minutes, the remaining teams finally arrived. Out of the original teams, only 12 pairs remained in the competition. The atmosphere was heavy when the instructor announced that the Indian sniper, Shrikant, had been critically wounded and rushed to the hospital. He had been shot with a high-caliber sniper rifle, an act that had shaken everyone. We were immediately moved to a luxury bus for our departure. I could see the panic on Sardar's face. His expressions were a direct threat to our secret. I tried to calm Sardar down, whispering that he needed to maintain his composure or he would give us away. Once we reached the camp, we finally stripped off our heavy ghillie suits and changed into civilian clothes. As soon as we were alone, I asked him about tea, trying to normalize the situation. He moved toward the electric kettle, but his mind was elsewhere. He looked at me and asked, "Who do you think could have sabotaged the rifle?" I warned him that discussing this here was risky, as the authorities likely already knew Shrikant was hit by our bullet. Sardar pulled a milk carton from the small fridge, his hands steady but his eyes full of suspicion. He believed that the person who was shot was actually the one responsible for the sabotage. I nodded slowly, but I reminded him that if that were the case, they wouldn't have bothered chasing us through the dense woods. Sardar threw the empty milk carton into the trash and started adding tea leaves to the boiling water. He pointed out that they couldn't have known our exact hiding spot. Just as he was about to elaborate, there was a sharp knock on the door. A stranger stood there asking for Zeeshan. He told me that Colonel Scott wanted to see me immediately. My heart skipped a beat. I looked at Sardar, told him I'd have my tea later, and followed the man. Soon I was standing face to face with Colonel Scott. His scarred, weathered face was familiar and his presence was intimidating. I stood at attention, giving him a formal salute. He stared at me for a long time, trying to break my spirit with his gaze, but I didn't flinch. Without any preamble, he asked me if I knew the penalty for murder. He told me an Indian soldier was dying, and it wasn't an accident. The pressure was mounting. I told the colonel that we were being framed, but he just shook his head. He claimed that only he and I knew the real truth, but to the world, this looked like a cold-blooded assassination. He then mentioned Captain Jennifer, implying she was involved. I reacted bitterly, realizing we were caught in a web of lies. Scott explained that Jennifer didn't know the full scope. She was just told how to help us get a good position in the course. Scott pointed out that my friend used a sniper rifle this time, whereas before, I had taken out targets without using such lethal force. I tried to defend our actions, but he cut me off. He said he had video footage that would prove our guilt in a court of law. I closed my eyes, realizing we were trapped. He laid out the grim reality. The shooter would face the electric chair, and the accomplice would get 10 years of hard labor. I looked him in the eye and asked what he really wanted from me. Colonel Scott smiled, calling it a manly response. He told me that if anyone else could do the job he had in mind, he wouldn't be bothering me. I replied sarcastically, asking if I was truly that special. He reminded me that since the 1971 conflict, no one had successfully hit a target from such a distance. He needed a ghost, a shooter who could achieve the impossible. Scott explained that the target was 800 meters away. I told him that if killing was the only solution, I would rather face my punishment than murder an innocent man. But then he dropped a bombshell. The target was a notorious enemy of my faith. He handed me a thick file containing information on the man. He gave me 2 days to read it and make my decision. It was a deal with the devil, and I had 48 hours to choose my fate. I asked him why he hadn't used that specific rifle before. He laughed and admitted they had tried a few times but failed. He explained that whenever Sardar tried to fire, they would target the sniper before he could pull the trigger. They needed me because Sardar had already had a confrontation with the Indian team, making him a perfect scapegoat. They had even ignored our illegal mobile phones, just to let this plan play out perfectly. Scott promised that if I agreed, the charges would vanish. Shrikant was alive, and someone else would take the blame for the shooting. I stood up to leave, and he reminded me to keep this a secret, though I could consult Sardar. The target's name was Brainwaves, a powerful man with deep political ties and a well-known hatred for Muslims. He was protected by an army of commandos and lived in a high-tech fortress. It was a suicide mission. Later, I sat in the lawn with Sardar and explained everything. He was skeptical, wondering if this was another trap to frame Muslims for terrorism. I told him that this mission was different because it involved a high-tech sniper rifle that no ordinary soldier could access. Sardar suggested consulting Luna, believing her intelligence background could help. However, I didn't want to drag her into this mess and risk her life along with ours. That night, Jennifer visited my room. She tried to act casual, but I could feel the tension. I was cold toward her, knowing she had manipulated the situation with Shrikant. She tried to see the file I was reading, but I hid it. When I confronted her about giving Shrikant the mobile phone, she couldn't look me in the eye. She claimed she did it to protect herself, but I saw it as a betrayal of our friendship. She left the room in tears. I realized I had no choice but to agree to Scott's terms. I met him the next day and delivered my decision. He was pleased but warned me that I had only 1 week to train with a new, unmarked sniper rifle. This weapon had to be left behind at the scene so it couldn't be traced back to the military. I asked about the other snipers, and he said they would be kept at the camp under the guise of an investigation to avoid any suspicion. For the next 5 days, Jennifer and I went to the firing range every morning. I practiced relentlessly, firing hundreds of rounds at targets placed at 800 and 900 meters. I trained in every possible weather condition, high winds, scorching heat, and low light. My precision became absolute. I knew that failure wasn't an option. If I missed, the world would become a much more dangerous place for me. The hunt for brainwaves was finally on.